Desperation breeds insanity. By 1944, the tide of World War II had turned decisively against the Third Reich. Allied bombers ruled the skies, systematically dismantling the industrial heart of the Ruhr, while German armies were in full retreat across every theater. Yet, in the face of certain defeat, the Nazi high command clung to a fanatical belief in the Endsieg, the ultimate victory. Deep in underground salt mines and hidden forest bunkers, engineers were pouring the Reich's dwindling supplies of fuel, steel, and rare minerals into weapons that promised miracles. These weren't just ambitious engineering projects, they were the final symptoms of a collective delusion. They were the Wunderwaffen, the so-called wonder weapons that Hitler believed could rewrite the laws of physics and reverse the course of a lost war through sheer technological fantasy. We begin with one of the most widely deployed and deeply flawed experiments in remote warfare, the Goliath tracked mine. This tiny remote-controlled suicide tank was designed to be a beetle of destruction. Its mission was simple: crawl across no man's land, drive directly under an Allied tank or against a concrete bunker, and detonate its massive payload. The initial inspiration for the Goliath actually came from a captured French prototype designed by engineer Adolphe Quegres. The German firm Borgward took over the design, producing over 7,500 units across two main variations, the electric-motored SDKFZ-302 and the later, cheaper, gasoline-powered 303. But the Goliath was tethered to reality in the most literal and fragile sense. It was steered by an operator using a joystick connected to a triple-strand control cable that trailed hundreds of meters behind the vehicle. At a cost of over 1,000 Reichsmarks per unit, roughly the price of 5 MG-42 machine guns, these vehicles were often neutralized before they even reached their targets. Allied infantry quickly discovered that a simple pair of wire cutters or a well-placed grenade was all it took to sever the umbilical cord. Once the wire was cut, the wonder weapon became nothing more than an expensive stationary pile of scrap metal and unexploded ordnance. Next, we look at a weapon that attempted to defy the very ballistics of infantry combat, the Krummlauf, or curved barrel. In the claustrophobic urban ruins of the Eastern Front, the Krummlauf promised a revolutionary edge. The idea was deceptively clever: allow an infantryman to fire around corners or out of tank hatches without exposing a single inch of their body to enemy fire. Designed by a team led by Theodor Bergmann, this device was intended as a specialized attachment to the STG-44, the world's first true assault rifle. It even included a triangular periscope mirror to allow the soldier to aim while staying entirely behind cover. But the problem was the physics of the bullet itself. Forcing a high-velocity rifle round to turn 30, 45, or 90 degrees at thousands of feet per second placed impossible stress on the metal. Despite being manufactured at the vast Leipheimer Metal Works, the technology was fundamentally unsustainable. The friction was so intense that the bullets would often shatter into red-hot shrapnel before leaving the barrel, turning a precision rifle into an unpredictable short-range shotgun. The 90-degree version was particularly notorious for its catastrophic failure rate, with the barrels often deforming or bursting after barely a single magazine of ammunition. It was an over-engineered solution to a problem that simple tactics could have solved. Hitler's obsession with high-magnitude terror weapons reached its peak with the V-series, but the most ambitious of these was not a rocket, but the V3 supergun, the London gun. While the V-1 and V-2 were flying bombs, the V-3 was a colossal fixed cannon built directly into the earth. It was designed to rain shells on London from over 160 kilometers away, firing at a rate of one shell every 6 seconds. Officially known by the deceptive codename Hochdruckpumpe, or high-pressure pump, the core design was credited to engineer August Conders. Its system used a 140-meter-long barrel lined with dozens of side chambers. As the shell passed each chamber, a secondary propellant charge would ignite, continuously accelerating the projectile to speeds that traditional gunpowder cannons could never achieve. The immense installation at Mimoix, France, was a nightmare of construction, excavated deep into the chalk hillsides by thousands of forced laborers who worked in appalling conditions. It was a fortress of concrete and steel, but it was also a stationary target. Fortunately for the people of London, Allied tall-boy bunker-buster bombs shattered the complex before a single shell could be fired at the city. It was a multi-million-mark tomb for a project that valued scale over survival. Now, we cross the line from bizarre engineering into the realm of pure science fiction. Proposed by rocket pioneer Hermann Oberth as early as the 1920s, the sun gun, Sonnengewehr, was envisioned as the ultimate high-ground advantage, a colossal orbital mirror, 9 square kilometers in size, capable of focusing the sun's raw energy onto a single point on the Earth's surface. The concept was seriously researched by the German Army's artillery proving grounds at Hillersleben, where scientists calculated the feasibility of using metallic sodium as the reflective surface. Its intended use was pure megalomania, boiling rivers, incinerating entire cities, and melting enemy armor from space. However, the technology required to launch and assemble such a massive structure in orbit was decades, if not a century, beyond the Reich's reach. It was a project that would have required a functional space program during a time when Germany was running out of basic ball bearings and aviation fuel. The sun gun stands as the most extreme example of how detached the Nazi leadership had become from the material reality of their situation. The ultimate symbol of this gigantism was not a satellite or a cannon, but a tank that would have dwarfed anything ever seen on a battlefield. The Landkreuzer P-1000 Ratte was Hitler's personal vision of a land cruiser, a 1,000-ton armored fortress. The concept was drawn up by Edward Grote, an engineer with a background in submarine construction, which explains why the design looked more like a warship on tracks. It was to be armed with 2 280mm naval guns, the same primary armament found on the battleship Gneisenau, and crewed by a small army of 40 men. The Ratte was never built because it was physically impossible to deploy. At 1,000 tons, it would have collapsed nearly every bridge in Europe, crushed the very roads it traveled on, and been so slow that it would have been a sitting duck for Allied ground attack aircraft. Albert Speer, the Minister of Armaments, finally canceled the project in 1943, realizing that the steel required for a single Ratte could instead build dozens of highly effective Panther tanks. It was a fantasy of invincibility that ignored the basic laws of logistics and gravity. But while the Ratte remained a paper dream, some wonder weapons actually took to the sky, often with lethal consequences for their own pilots. The Me-163 Comet was the only operational rocket-powered fighter of the war. It was a breathtakingly fast, tailless power egg that could climb to 30,000 feet in under 3 minutes, leaving Allied P-51 Mustangs looking like they were standing still. Designed by Dr. Alexander Lippisch and manufactured by Messerschmitt, the Comet was a marvel of aerodynamics, but it was powered by a chemical cocktail of death. The engine used T-Stoff and C-Stoff, two highly volatile and corrosive propellants that would explode instantly on contact with each other. The primary designer of the rocket motor, Walter Thiel, had been killed in the 1943 bombing of Peenemünde, leaving the Comet with unresolved safety issues. If a pilot survived the takeoff and the high-speed interception, they still had to land a fuel-exhausted glider on a simple metal skid. If any residual fuel leaked during a rough landing, the aircraft would dissolve the pilot or erupt into a fireball. In the end, the Comet was more dangerous to the Germans than to the Allies. More pilots were lost to fuel explosions and landing accidents than were ever shot down in combat. These wonder weapons weren't the breakthroughs they were promised to be. They were catastrophic distractions. Every ton of steel used for a failed supercannon and every gallon of fuel burned in a rocket fighter was a resource that could have gone toward the reliable tanks and aircraft that Germany actually needed to defend its borders. While the Allies focused on the boring but effective science of mass production and logistics, the Nazi regime gambled its final hours on science fiction miracles. Ultimately, these bizarre dreams didn't save the Reich. They only accelerated its collapse, leaving behind a final haunting testament to the dangers of a regime that chose to chase impossible solutions while the reality of war crashed down around them. If you want to see the weapons that actually worked, the ones that defined the tactical reality of the front, click here to watch our video on the 5 best tank destroyers of World War II. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden corners of military history.